Hello, families. I'm Patty Guthrie. I'm a teacher at Bethel Virtual Academy, and hopefully, I have the pleasure of knowing your child. I started teaching way back in 1983, so technology is not my strong suit. But most of my career, I have taught kids with emotional and behavior disorders, and that's been my primary area of study. I've mostly been in a classroom with kids who had challenging behaviors. Most of the time, I've had them all day long. So we've had families who have asked us for some tips about managing student behavior while they're doing their work at home. Many people are in a position they never really expected to be the primary teacher for your child. Of course, you've always been their first teacher. So I created some tips for managing student behavior. Again, technology is not my strong suit, so the only way I could figure out how to present this and have you see the slide is to keep it in this format. So I'll also post the presentation and then you're welcome to read it. I'm not going to read every slide. I'm just going to talk to every slide. So this is supporting positive student behavior. Tips for managing behavior in a positive way. And you see that positive is pretty redundant, but we know that we do best when we are being positive and that others do best when we treat them in a positive way. So let's get started. The cornerstone of any behavior management system is threefold. It's structure, routine, and predictability. And these things overlap. So when we structure a space, we define that space, or we can define time. I think of structure as a little fishnet. So we have control and maybe we let some go and then we bring it back and get control again. In the classroom, it's easy to see that if you say, okay, when you're in your seat, I'll call you to line up. And then you say, row 1, line up. Row 2, line up. Versus, okay, everybody line up. And that's not very structured. So we want to make sure that we are structured. So in your home, if you can define a workspace, use a chair that structures space. Maybe you have a specific countertop or a table. And then you use that every single time. That's predictability and routine, and that has a great influence on behavior. Another thing you think about is time. How do we structure our time and make it routine and predictable? And that would be to make a schedule. Sometimes you need to use a counter. If you're waiting for a student, I always count back. Okay, let's be ready in 3. 3, 2, 1. And then to be specific, not only in our work situation, but also in the way that we treat behavior. So we're going to have expectations and we're going to be consistent with those expectations every single day, and then be consistent in how we respond to any challenges that we have. So we're all born with a personality unique to us. It has a lot of different facets. One part of our personality is our need for power and control. Everybody has a need for power and control, some high, some low. There are professions that really lend themselves to a high need for power and control. That would be like an airline pilot or a CEO, financial advisor, or even a teacher, because we're controlling little kids all day long. So it's not a bad thing, but how do we deal with a 7-year-old who maybe has a high need for power and control and gives me a little bit of a struggle when I'm ready to start an activity? Well, the hardest part is getting started. So we can offer a choice, and that can make a big difference. My go-to choice always is, would you like to use this pencil or this pencil? And I'll have a couple different colored pencils there. Maybe one with cartoons on it and one plain or whatever. And then I might say, would you like to do your reading first or your math first? Would you like to do this part of your math or this part of your math first? When you're getting ready for bed, you can say, would you like to brush your teeth first or put on your pajamas first? And that choice is often enough to get over that hump to get started. A choice must be equal. If you say things like, if you don't do this, you're going to time out, or you can do your math or you can go to time out, that's not a choice. So a choice is being able to make a decision about two equal things. It's important that we clearly define expectations. All people do best when the expectations are clearly defined. So you can think about Disney World. There are a whole bunch of people at Disney World. It's very big. We don't see a lot of big behavior problems. And that's because there's an incredible team who's constantly working on structure, routine, predictability, positive comments, and then establishing the expectations. So when you get on a ride, you hear things like, keep your hands in the car, put on your seatbelt, remain in the car until the ride has completely stopped, things like that. So we do best when we know what is expected of us. So you might want to post your expectations. You can call them rules, call them norms, whatever you want to call them. If you get your student involved in helping you come up with expectations, they even have a greater buy-in, and they know what they are. It's important not to have more than 5 rules. I usually have 3. So it may be start work promptly, or start work on your schedule, work for 20 minutes and then have a 10-minute break. It might be that for your student you can say work for 10 minutes and have a 5-minute break. You might have a rule about stay on task while working, and then you need to talk about what does that look like. It means talk on the topic, keep your eyes on the printer, on the learning coach, be doing your writing. Then you're probably going to have a rule about speaking respectfully to one another. And of course, that's a rule we want to use all the time, but when we have it posted, it can be really helpful to us. And then if you have a child who has a specific tendency to do something like hop up and spontaneously go get something they want, then maybe you need a rule that would be something like ask before getting up or ask before leaving the area. So figure out some things that will work for you and your learning situation and your student. So this is a little bit tricky, but if you get in the habit of doing this, wow, it can be so helpful, is to ask students instead of tell them. So you already know, it's very well ingrained in your brain how you want your student to behave. We want them to internalize how they're supposed to behave. And they know what they're supposed to do, but I want their neurons firing, not mine. So I always ask kids what they need to be doing before I tell them. If I ask them and they're not able to tell me, then I'll either help them along or then I'll tell them. But most students know the expectation. Also, when you ask them what they're supposed to be doing, it gives you a great opportunity to praise. So my go-to, even with kindergartners in the hall, kindergartners run in the hall. It's an impulsivity thing. So then I say, if I need to step in front of them, and I say, how do you travel in the hall? And at first that throws them a little bit, but then they get it, and they go, walking? And I say, good thinking. Yes, walking in the hall. Okay, let me watch you. Good job walking in the hall. So I've given myself opportunities to praise the right behavior. So you might say things like, where should you be looking when you're reading? Great, you need your eyes on the print. Awesome. And sometimes they might not say it, but they'll do that behavior, and you can praise that as well. How about things like, what topic are we supposed to be on? Yes, let's talk about our math. So if you have your rules or your expectations posted, you can refer to those, and maybe you're going to say, hey, check rule number 2. Okay, great. What are you supposed to be doing now? How should we speak to one another respectfully? And that goes both ways. That's for the teacher and the student. So when we can be specific about behavior, that can be very helpful to us. So if we can be objective and specific, and that is true again for all people, no matter the age. So when you sit down with your boss for a performance review, you're looking for more than you're doing good or you're doing bad. If you work in sales, maybe you're getting some specific numbers. If you work in customer service, maybe they're listing some specific behaviors that you're doing that are working well in the role that you have. So we want to make sure that we're giving our students specific and objective praise. So some examples would be like, you're speaking in a respectful tone. You're in your seat. Great. You wrote these words neatly and used the lines on the paper. Anything that is specific is actually more powerful. So keep that in mind. So some people say, oh, she praises too much. Well, actually, research shows us that we cannot overpraise. Praise is a very important tool for us in developing behavior. There are some guidelines about praise. We need to make sure that our praise is specific to the performance or the process. So thinking is a process, completing work is performance. So it's okay to praise the behavior immediately when the behavior starts, unless you're working on stamina. So maybe you know your student can work well for 5 minutes, and you've talked about increasing that to 7 minutes, and so then you would wait. But otherwise, it's okay and it's great to praise immediately. Very important. This is so important. True praise has no reference to past inappropriate behavior. A true compliment does not refer to past behavior. So you don't want to say things like, you're a really nice person now, you used to be a jerk. You say, you're a really nice person, if that's what you're saying to a friend or family member. So to a child, we may say things like, wow, you are doing a great job focusing on your work. Instead of saying, well, I'm glad to see you're sitting still. Yesterday you were all over the place. Or you're usually so distracted. Good job focusing. So we want to make no reference to any past inappropriate behavior. So research shows us that if we say things like, you're a hard worker, instead of saying things like, you're smart, then we actually will find that students are more persistent at working in the future. So there is nothing more powerful to a human than attention. Again, some people have a high need for attention and some have a low need for attention, but we all need attention. It confirms our existence. We can't survive when we're infants unless we have attention, because we need somebody to care for us and feed us and all of that. So there is a basic need in all humans to have attention. Some people are born with a high need for attention. There's nothing wrong with that. Actors have a very high need for attention. So do a lot of bosses, CEOs, that sort of thing. We need to make sure that we are paying attention when we have the behavior that we want. And attention is eye contact, touch, or any kind of verbalization. So when we have the behavior that we want, it's most powerful to use all three. When we're trying to get behavior to change, we want to use the least amount of attention as possible. So one thing that I always say is that if you are coaxing compliance, you are reinforcing non-compliance. So if you're saying, come on, let's do math, come on, let's do math, come on, let's get going, you are reinforcing not working. So I try very hard to say the direction one time and then to use some of my other strategies. It might simply be, what was the direction? And then the student would repeat that. So I heard this week that Russell Wilson has 8 coaches. And one of those coaches is a stamina coach. So we think about stamina for running, but actually we have to build stamina for all activities that we do. And staying focused is one of those activities we need to build stamina for. So like any behavior, in order to build that behavior, we have to evaluate where we are, set a goal, make a plan, and work toward that behavior. So research is very clear that the only way we can build focus is to practice focus, just like any other skill. So we can help our kids start learning about stamina and work with them to build stamina. So a typical goal for a second grader is to be able to read silently for 20 minutes. At the beginning of kindergarten, if kids can sit and look at a book for 5 minutes, that's great for a lot of them. So building that stamina. If you can have kids involved in making the plan to build their stamina and becoming aware of their own behavior, that, of course, is most powerful. So research is very clear that positive people have a constant dialogue of self-talk. We have to be the positive voice in our child's head, so we can provide a positive script for our children. So instead of things like, you're so distracted, you have to move all the time, we can say things like, we're building our focus, we're growing our reading. So we can be that positive voice in our child's head. Now, sometimes if you've had a child with some behavior challenges, maybe within your family or within the neighborhood, you can be the positive PR person for your child, and so you help change everybody's view. We're really working on our ability to share, or we're really working on our impulse control instead of saying, oh, he's out of control. So things like that. So those are some good examples of being that positive script in their head. That what's going to happen in their head is what they hear you say. So most of the behavior challenges that we deal with in the classroom, as well as what you're dealing with at home, are really pretty minor behaviors, but maybe they're happening way more often than you'd like for them to do. So a great strategy is to delay your response. We just call that a delayed response. And what we know is that most behavior will take care of itself if we just wait it out. And then we can reinforce the behavior when it gets back on track. So if you wait a couple of seconds, you're not letting your child think that that behavior is okay. You're just letting it take care of itself and then making sure to praise and give attention to the right behavior when it starts. If the behavior doesn't change, then we want to use one of our other positive strategies. We used to tell people you need to give consequences immediately. Well, we know that that's not necessarily true. We don't want to wait until the child can't remember what the consequence was for, but we also don't want to give consequences so quickly that we regret what we may have said impulsively. So you can maybe say, I see you're under control now. We're going to have to talk about this some more. Give yourself a little bit of think time. So this seems a little bit contrary to think that we need to arouse our nervous system because we feel like we need to tell kids to calm down. But actually, we know that we have to arouse our nervous system in order to focus. And you can think about a time when maybe you needed to study, or you were reading, or you were at work, and you knew that you needed to get up and walk briskly to the water fountain or go get a cup of coffee or something like that. So that is a strategy you develop to arouse your nervous system. And we can help our children develop these strategies, and it will benefit them for their whole lives. So we fire up those neurons, we get them ready to work and receive new information. So some examples that I like are brisk walk, hard jumps in place, heavy work is good, wall push-ups, table push-ups, pulling on the bottom of your chair to activate these large muscles in the upper part of your body, pushing your palms together, and then taking a deep breath. Getting a big breath of oxygen works instantly to arouse our brains. And kids know this because they'll be sitting there and they'll yawn. Well, you don't want your child to grow up and think that it's okay to yawn when they're in a meeting with their boss. And it's not respectful to yawn when they're in a meeting with their teacher. So you can teach them to take a big breath. So using a when-then statement is a positive contingency. So we take something that is very desirable and we make it contingent upon or depend upon finishing something that is less desirable. And that, when you can do that, that is developing delayed gratification. So working hard for an extended period of time so that you get something that is highly desirable to you, such as saving your money to buy something bigger instead of spending it as soon as you get it. So we can use a positive contingency. It's very powerful. It's easy to do in the classroom because maybe we say, okay, if everybody gets this math done, we can have 2 extra minutes of recess. So you want to be mindful of that when you're working at home. And you can say things like, when you finish your math, you can have your choice time, and then maybe you have a menu of options. Posting those menus, that menu of choices is great. Teachers do that in the classroom. You can have them in a notebook. You can have them posted up on the wall. So even things like, again, remembering that your attention is most powerful. If you can make having some free attention time dependent upon finishing work, that's great. So when you finish your work today, we can go for a walk. Very powerful. Then to put it all together now, we want to incorporate as many of these little tips as we can. So we might say, you're in your seat, ready to work. What's next? So we've praised behavior that we see and we want, and then we've asked them to think about what comes next. Being very specific. So here's a good one. You might even say, you did the top part of this paper in 10 minutes. How long do you think you need for the bottom part? Do you think you could do it in 7 minutes? And then set the timer if you need to. So one thing that we want you to know is that behavior management is something that every teacher is working on their entire career. And we hope these tips are helpful for you. But if you feel as though you need more and you'd like to develop a specific behavior plan, then we are very happy to help you with that. You can ask your teacher. And if your teacher is not able to help you, she or he can refer you to someone who can. You're very welcome to email me or give me a call if you have some questions that I might be able to help you with. So I wanted to talk a little bit about creative reinforcers. There is nothing more powerful than letting a child come up with reinforcers. And what one person enjoys might be miserable for another person. So sometimes we think that a behavior or letting a kid do something is reinforcing, and it's not. So we need to make sure we're asking them. Then you can have a menu of reinforcers, again, in a notebook or on an index card or on the wall, and then you can make them worth different values. So maybe this reinforcer is when you finish this assignment. And maybe if you do all the assignments for the day within the specific time period, this is a bigger reinforcement that you have. Or maybe you can build up for a whole week. So really just having some different reinforcers is very powerful. Your time and attention are the most powerful reinforcers. I can't say that enough. And then I highly recommend that you are looking for reinforcers that are free. And some examples might be a movie night. So again, it's one thing to have your child be able to watch a movie, but it is so powerful for you to sit with them and watch it with them, even if it's something that you're not particularly crazy about. Allowing them to choose the dinner. Okay, this is what needs to happen, and then Friday night you get to choose dinner. And again, that speaks to that need for power and control. One time I had a child who came up with the reinforcer that his dad was going to make his bed every day for a week. He loved that one. So it might be take a walk, play a game, have a sleepover. My last strategy for you is to say yes more. Figure out a way to say yes. Yes, when you finish this math work, you can do that. Yes, you'll need to buy that with your own money. So great tips, smile more and say yes more. Thank you and good luck.